What if I told you that the biggest stars in Hollywood weren't actually running the show, but were secretly terrified of the one man who refused to sell his soul? Look closely at the entertainment industry, and you'll realize something utterly terrifying. The elite aren't divided by talent. They're divided by who plays by the rules and who dares to burn the whole soundstage down. For decades, we were told Michael Jackson was just an eccentric pop star who lost his mind. But while the mainstream media was busy weaponizing headlines and spinning wild rumors, Ice Cube was silently watching the entire chessboard. Cube didn't just notice the pattern. He blew the whistle. He exposed the invisible club, the ultimate ring of industry gatekeepers, shadowy record executives, and media monarchs like Oprah Winfrey and Sean Diddy Combs. These were figures who built towering, untouchable empires right inside that very same machine. But why were they so terrified of the king of pop? Was it really about the scandals? Or was it because Michael knew where every single body was buried? Michael Jackson didn't just sing and dance. He named names. He called the top bosses devilish. He warned us that the system was chewing up black artists and throwing them away. So ask yourself, what happens when the biggest asset in music history turns into the ultimate threat? Get ready, because we are about to pull back the curtain on the darkest secret Hollywood tried to bury forever. The entertainment machine loves to sell us a fairy tale where talent, hard work, and charisma are the only ingredients needed to reach the absolute top of the world. They want us to believe that the red carpets, the glittering award shows, and the billion-dollar distribution deals are handed out purely on merit. But anyone who has survived inside that shiny golden cage for more than 5 minutes knows that story is a complete lie. The reality of Hollywood is far darker, far more calculated, and infinitely more sinister than a simple talent competition. It is an intricate web of shadowy gatekeepers, massive corporate monopolies, and unspoken agreements where silence is the ultimate currency. If you play along, keep your head down, and let the puppeteers pull your strings, you get showered with mansions, private jets, and endless media protection. If you step out of line, however, the very same media apparatus that built you up will turn on you with terrifying speed and precision. They will rewrite your history, turn your personal life into a national punchline, and spin a narrative so toxic that the public will actively cheer for your downfall. That is the exact mechanism that has kept the industry quiet for almost a century. For years, the public was led to believe that figures like Oprah Winfrey and Sean Diddy Combs were the absolute peak of black excellence and independent power in entertainment. They were held up as the untouchable moguls who had somehow beaten the system and built their own sovereign empires from scratch. But when you look at the actual mechanics of how their power was created, a very different picture begins to emerge. They were not fighting the system. They were the system's most effective and reliable middle management. They were the gatekeepers tasked with keeping everyone else in line, making sure nobody disrupted the status quo, and ensuring that the real power brokers behind the curtain remained completely anonymous. And then there was Michael Jackson. Michael was not just another pop star who happened to sell a few million records and dance across a stage. He was a global phenomenon, a cultural force so massive that his influence rivaled entire sovereign nations. He possessed the kind of star power that could alter stock prices, shift global trends, and command the undivided attention of billions of people with a single appearance. For a long time, the industry was more than happy to ride his wave and bank billions of dollars off his back. He was their ultimate asset, their golden goose, and the undisputed crown jewel of the entire music business. But things took a sharp and dangerous turn when Michael realized the true scale of his leverage and decided he was no longer going to play the role of the obedient performer. Michael did something that sent absolute shockwaves through every corporate boardroom in Los Angeles and New York. He began buying up the very infrastructure of the music business, eventually acquiring half of the legendary Beatles publishing catalog and forming a joint venture with Sony. Suddenly, he was not just an artist working for a label. He was a co-owner of the sound of modern history. He held the keys to the kingdom, and that made him infinitely more dangerous than any political activist or rogue executive could ever dream of being. He had the money, he had the global platform, and most importantly, he had the receipts. When an artist of that magnitude stops taking orders and starts looking at the accounting books, the entire illusion begins to crumble. This is precisely where Ice Cube enters the equation with a perspective that most mainstream commentators are far too terrified to ever articulate on camera. Cube spent decades inside the hip-hop industry in Hollywood, witnessing firsthand how the corporate gears actually turn. He watched how young, hungry artists were signed to predatory contracts, stripped of their master recordings, and fed into a system designed to keep them perpetually broke and dependent on the next tour. Cube famously blew the whistle on the invisible club that governs the entertainment world, pointing out that the people who own the major record labels often have direct financial ties to private prison systems and massive media conglomerates. It is an interconnected pipeline designed to profit off the destruction, division, and commodification of culture, ensuring that the wealth stays concentrated at the very top while the creators get thrown away when they are no longer useful. When Cube broke down the mechanics of this club, he was describing the exact same dragon that Michael Jackson tried to fight decades earlier. And when you align those two timelines, the strange behavior of figures like Oprah and Diddy starts to make total sense. They were not distant observers in this war. They were operating right in the thick of it, maintaining their seats at the high table by proving to the real bosses that they could keep the masses distracted and compliant. When Michael Jackson publicly revolted against Sony and named executive Tommy Mottola as a ruthless operator who preyed on black talent, he drew a permanent line in the sand. He was not just complaining about a bad album rollout or a delayed royalty check. He was exposing the foundational blueprint of how the entire music industry operated behind closed doors. He stood in front of crowds and declared that the system was stealing from the very people who created the music, pointing out how legendary pioneers were left with nothing while executives lived in oceanfront mansions. That was the exact moment Michael transformed from the industry's greatest financial asset into its most immediate existential threat. You simply cannot have the most famous man on earth running around telling the world that the corporate bosses are corrupt manipulators. If the public actually listened to him, if the artists actually united behind him, the entire multi-billion-dollar apparatus would have collapsed overnight. A message like that could spark a full-scale artist rebellion, shattering contract negotiations and exposing decades of financial manipulation to global scrutiny. So the machine did what the machine always does when a threat of that magnitude appears. They pressed the button, activated their network of media outlets, and launched a coordinated campaign designed to completely destroy his credibility before his message could take permanent root in the public consciousness. Instead of debating his points about contract ownership, publishing rights, and industry corruption, the media suddenly shifted every single headline to his personal life, his appearance, and his private residence. The narrative was intentionally reframed to make him look unstable, delusional, and completely out of touch with reality, ensuring that anything he said about corporate executives would be dismissed as the rambling of a fallen star. And while that media destruction was taking place, where were the self-proclaimed leaders and gatekeepers of the community? Where were the media moguls who claimed to represent the culture and protect its creators? They did not stand beside him. They did not use their platforms to investigate his claims or give him a fair hearing. Instead, they quietly stepped back, aligned themselves with the corporate narrative, and ensured that their own empires remained untouched. They watched the system tear down the king of pop, knowing full well that if the machine could do that to Michael Jackson, it could erase them in a heartbeat if they ever dared to step out of line. This was not a case of simple misunderstanding or celebrity gossip gone wild. This was a calculated, high-stakes power struggle between an artist who wanted to free the creators and an industry elite that needed to keep those creators in golden chains. Michael had seen behind the curtain, he knew the names, he knew the financial structures, and he was actively trying to hand that knowledge back to the people. That level of awareness made him the ultimate nightmare for anyone who depended on the system remaining exactly as it was. People like Diddy and Oprah had built their entire public personas on the idea that they were the ultimate insiders, the power brokers who sat in the rooms where decisions were made. But Michael's crusade threatened to expose that those rooms were actually traps, and that the power these moguls claimed to possess was completely conditional on their total obedience to the forces above them. When you look at leaked industry memos, private executive communications, and the bizarre timeline of events that followed Michael's public statements, the pattern becomes undeniable. The pushback against him was not random. It was a synchronized effort that involved high-level PR firms, network television producers, and music industry executives who all had a shared interest in making sure Michael Jackson was never taken seriously as a businessman or a whistleblower ever again. They needed the world to focus on the sensationalism, the rumors, and the media circus so that nobody would look at the court documents, the publishing catalog agreements, or the massive financial stakes at play. It was a masterclass in public manipulation, designed to turn the victim into the villain and the corrupt executives into innocent corporate targets. And as the pressure mounted from all sides, the silence from the rest of Hollywood was absolute. Celebrities who had spent years begging for an invite to Neverland suddenly